if you haven't noticed. So in ArcGIS, you probably have a layer for your conservation easements or a layer for your feelands, or maybe you have a layer for issues on a certain property, and you keep all of those things in files. But really what it is more or less a bucket. And you can create whatever you want at any time. And there aren't restrictions on what you can create because it's mapping software and they don't know what you want to do. So they just allow you to create anything you want. You can put it anywhere, and it often devolves unless you have someone who's good at GIS. Things can get out of whack. You get multiple versions of stuff, and it can get kind of messy. Mapping in landscape is very different. I mean, it's the same because obviously it's both mapping, but as with a lot of things in landscape, what we are trying to do is trying to keep all your data organized. We're trying to guide you towards actually creating records for the things that you want to keep track of. And we're trying to help you, enter the data where that data needs to be entered. And mapping is no different. And so the thing that I'm going to be touching on again and again and again and again today, like ad nauseum, is that it's so important that you understand the context of what you want to map in landscape and what you want to change and what you want to capture. And so this little infographic that I made yesterday, I don't know whether it's helpful or not, but it's just trying to get across the point that these different things that you're mapping, structures and uses and issues, they all live in places in landscape, and they live in the places where you're tracking those things in landscape. So if you're tracking, for example, geography for encroachments, that will probably live in issue geography, which lives inside of a stewardship site, but it lives inside of a specific stewardship site record. And so in order to edit issue geography, you'll have to go into that stewardship site record, and you'll have to either create or go to the issue, and then you can begin editing the geography that belongs to that issue. And so this infographic is just giving you ideas of where things could end up. This is what we've seen. So examples down below, and then the name of the layer up top. It lists some of the custom layers that you might use, as well as some of the automatic layers. And then it's got that parcel boundary sort of big and glowing on top, sort of trying to point out how important that parcel boundary is in defining like where this thing is in space. And so this is available to you for reference if you want via the knowledge base. So I stuck this inside of our layer definitions article, which is in the mapping section. And just as a reminder, I think so far on every training, we've taught someone about this next feature, but there's a help button up here in the upper right-hand corner. And if you click on that, you can search and you can say, what was Michael talking about with layers, the layer definition, and you can search mapping, and you can search reports, and you can search any of the over 100 articles on our knowledge base. So you can click on the article, you can read it. That's not big enough to be useful. So if you want to go to the knowledge base, you can actually say view original article, and you can be taken to the knowledge base where then you can peruse all of our many articles on mapping or any other article on any other topic. Like I said, there's over 100 up there now. So that is very, very useful. Please use it. And a lot of the things that I'm just going to be blowing through today will be spelled out step by step in those articles. So you can always reference those articles along with, you'll be able to watch a recording of this as well. But if you don't want to sift through that, definitely turn to those articles. All right, so there are three different main types of maps in landscape. There's view maps, which are view/widget maps, which is what you're looking at over here. If you haven't done any edits to your dashboard, if you haven't changed your dashboard, then you probably have this property map over here, which is technically a widget, but widgets are based on views. And so this map, this property map, is actually built off of a property view. And so I'll walk you through creating view maps in a little bit. I think it's a function a lot of people don't know about, and it can be very, very cool, depending on what you want to do. The second type of map in landscape is a report map. That's the one we're mostly going to skip today, because it's fairly specialized although maps do behave a little bit differently in reports. The context that most people are familiar with report maps are in your annual monitoring visit maps, right? You have that map block that you can customize and you can change according to your needs. And those behave a little bit differently, like I said, than other maps in landscape, because they actually need to be printed. And finally, the third type of map in landscape, and the one that you're going to spend 99% of your time interacting with, putting data into and messing around with, is the record map. And so a record map is going to help you visualize those issues and visualize where your property is, and going to help you contextualize all of the information in your account. But before I go to a record map, I want to point out a few things that can make your life a little bit easier, hopefully, if you haven't already changed these. And so both of these things are in settings, and so these are only going to be available to administrators. So if you do want to change this and your administrators and on this call, you should get on them to try and change this around. But if I go to settings and map layers, first thing up here is custom layers, which we're actually going to end today on, because that's a really comprehensive, very cool feature. But it will be at the end of today's presentation. But down here, there are built-in layer styles. And if you go to this page and all of these are green, then making it look a little bit more like this, where it's very colorful, will make your life much, much easier. Because when you're interacting with that map and landscape, and just everything you look at is green, and then you have to change them in every single map, it can get really annoying, and it can get annoying if you don't want to change the appearance. Then everything is a green line or a green point. And so I really recommend changing these default styles. So changing issues to red is a really natural one. I've got my site visit geography as blue, so site visit points right here. Site visit lines are a dashed blue line. Site visit areas are a blue sort of square. I'm going to be talking about how you can mess around with styling in a little bit, but be aware to change the styling. You just click on that, you drag this around, you can change the transparency and stuff like that. But yes, definitely number one piece of advice, if you take anything away from today, change your built-in layer styles. It will make your life much easier. So the other setting that we introduced, I think a few weeks ago, is this cluster markers on view and widget maps. And so if I go to my property map and I zoom way out, you can see that the points are staying distinct, so that I can see that I have an orange and a green and a green. But if I change that setting to yes, so yes, cluster those markers, I go back and I zoom out, you'll see that it tries to bunch them and count them. So now I can see that there are 6 things underneath this point. So it got rid of a little bit of that detail. For instance, I can no longer see my active property over here. So if you want to disable that counting, if that's sort of getting on your nerves, you can disable that again via settings, cluster markers on views and widget maps, and say no. And that'll change that behavior on all views and all widgets. So if you have 1,000 holdings in the state of Virginia, it's going to be a lot of dots, but that's okay. You know, that's what you want. All right. So now let's go into a record map and start talking about actually mapping stuff. So I am going to go to first, been messing with this sample data. So I'm going to go to the Smithwood stewardship site, actually. And the map opens up over here on the right because I have mapped this parcel. Quick note, if you don't have a map over here on the right, and your screen instead looks something like this with a view map button, it's because your screen resolution is not big enough to display both the stewardship site details and the map at the same time. You can change the resolution of your browser. You can change the window size of your browser by pressing Control- and Control+. That's what I'm doing to show you the differences. But just be aware that that is changing your browser behavior. And so maybe it could change the appearance of some other websites. But again, that's Control+ and Control- is going to change that. I'm going to be operating today from this view with the map on the right, but all of the functions will be the same. If you are operating from this, you'll just have to do the extra step of clicking on View Map, but you won't have to do the extra step of clicking on the little layers button on the map, which I'll show you in a moment. Oh, interesting. All right. Let's go back to usual, and I'll refresh the page, and it should reset that. Okay. So we've got our map over here on the right. And the first thing that I want to point out is if you click on this Layers button, it opens the Layers pane. And up here at the top, it says Stewardship Site Map Layers. And that's really important. That's telling you which map is open. Is it a site visit map? Is it a issue map? Is it a stewardship site map? Is it a property map? So for example, if I bounce over to the property record for this, and I click on that Layers button again, it's going to show me property map layers up here. And that's telling me I'm looking at a property map. And so all of the editable layers, the context layers, those are all going to change based on the map that you're looking at, which in turn is based on the context that you're in. So here I am in a stewardship site. I click on the Layers button. It opens up a stewardship site map. Up top are the editable layers. These, again, are going to be the layers that are editable based on your context. Stewardship site-specific layers are sort of is a layer that can be maybe used to designate monitoring zones or wetland delineations on your stewardship sites. Stuff that is stuff that you want your stewardship staff to be aware of, but that doesn't fit in any of the other contexts that we give you. The other editable layer is this parcel boundary, and this is that really important layer that I keep pointing out. The parcel boundary is what we import as the main property boundary, and it's going to define the outer property boundary, which and it's also going to define the outer stewardship site boundary. And so those layers, those property boundaries, stewardship sites, those are all based on this parcel boundary. Down below, we have context layers. So context layers are all of the layers that are available to the stewardship site map that you can sort of slap on there in order to see them all at once. And so you can expand or collapse all of them at once by clicking on that expand button. And you can sort of get an idea of what you're looking at. Again, you can imagine if this was all green, it would be hard to distinguish what was going on over here. But you can activate different layers if you want. So these are going to be all of the layers that are available to your stewardship site. And you can see that the issue is in red, the baseline reports are in orange. It starts to get busy kind of fast, so I'm going to stick to just looking at my, my site visits. Some of these you'll notice only have areas, and these are also automatic layers that will never be editable in any context because Landscape is just creating them. So the other things you can do with this layers pane, you can click on the three dots, you can export data, which will just export everything you're looking at that's a property point, or it will export all of the site visit points that are visible, for example. And if you click on that, you can export it as a shapefile, KML file. You can export just the photos that are contained, or you can do this handy geography and photos for importing to another landscape map, which can be useful if you want to move stuff between layers, but I'll show you a couple different ways of doing that. There's reset style to default, which is going to reset it to that settings that I showed you, those default settings that you can change. So if you change the appearance and then you want to change it back, you can click on that. And then there's bring to front, bring forward, send backward, and send to back. I think one thing that might trip folks up a lot is, let's say you are attempting to click something on the map and it's not letting you click on it, and maybe it keeps going to the property boundary. What you want to do is use those send to bring to front, bring forward, send back. You want to use those to sort of toggle the relative selectability of those different layers. So if you're trying to click on something and you can't click on it, then what you want to do is find the layer over here, click on the three dots and say bring to front, and that will mean that it will be brought to the forward of all other layers, and you should be able to select it. The reason it's grayed out right now is because I've already done that for my site visit lines, and so it doesn't have that option. Alternatively, you can always kick the property boundary to the back rather than bringing stuff to the front. All right. The final thing that you can change is the base map. So your base maps are down below. There are 4 given to you by default. There's a couple of Esri base maps available. There's Esri Topo, and then there's the USA Topo. And you'll see that I have a couple fancy base maps here. I've got my 2019 ortho imagery and OpenStreetMap as well. And this is part of our new custom layers feature that I'll show you at the end of the training, where you can actually import tile maps. You can import service layers and use them as base maps. So that's a cool new feature. Just clicking on the eyeball, of course, will toggle the visibility. All right. So finally, if you want to edit a layer, you click on the 3 dots and click Edit Layer. I think a normal point of frustration is you want to edit something like this site visit points. So you find site visits and you click on this, and there's no edit layer. Why isn't there an edit layer? And it's because Landscape won't know if you want to create a new thing. Then when you're editing the layer, it won't know where to put it. It won't know which site visit to put it in. Similarly, if you want to create a new issue and you want to map that issue from here, you want to say, hey, I want to map a new encroachment, and there's no edit layer, that's because you're not in the correct context, right? You're not inside of an issue record, which is just so important. And so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go into site visits and show you a little bit about editing geography. So if you don't usually have the map open on your right, you may have missed this cool feature where if you hover over something, it will show you which feature is being hovered over on the right. That's just a neat little feature that we introduced a few months ago. But so here I am in my work tab, and I'm going to open up the layers, but notice it still hasn't changed. I'm still in a stewardship site map. And that's because I actually need to go into a site visit record. And now I'm inside a site visit record. I click on the layers button, and site visit layers are now editable. So I can click on the 3 dots, click Edit Layer, and I can now start editing that geography. So there are a bunch of different functions here to talk about. There's the import features button, where you can import shapefiles, KMLs, GPX. 1 or more geotag photos is super handy. So we're inside of a site visit. We want to import photos that were not taken with the mobile app. You can use 1 or more geotag photos and import those photos all at once. You can also, a file exported from other map is that thing that I showed you earlier where you can export a shapefile as a landscape map. It exports this sort of silly looking text file, but then you can import it into another map using this feature. Replace all the data in this layer will overwrite everything. And then the choose file, of course, is where you're going to choose the correct shapefile that you're going to want to import. Which I'm not going to do right now, but this is what that selection looks like. Of course, most of you are pretty familiar with choosing a file. So that's importing. You can also, of course, just draw features. So if you click on the pencil button and start clicking, then you'll start creating points. When you're done, you can click the thumbs up to save them, or click the thumbs down because we were just playing around, and it will delete those points. Now I want to open up that edit pane again, so I'm going to click on edit layer. You can trash features, you can delete features. This function behaves a little bit differently based on whether it's a line or a point or a polygon. The important thing to remember is if it is an area, so let me get to a site visit with an area here. So a little hard to see, but this number 4 down here is actually a site visit area that I've mapped. So if I click on the trash can button and I click on a vertex, it won't delete the feature. In order to delete the feature, I actually need to click on the trash can button, click on the middle of the area, and that should, oh, here we go. So we just changed this. So I'm now going to draw around the entire feature using the control, and then I'm going to click and drag around it, and that will delete the entire feature. You actually don't even need to click on the trash can button in order to delete those vertices. So if I just click on edit layer and click on a vertex, you'll see it goes away. And we can also create vertices as well.
Michael, I was just going to say, I think that you weren't zoomed in far enough to get to the middle of that polygon.
Oh, okay.
To just click on it.
Okay, cool. So one thing I should mention, the zoom level is limited to the resolution of the base map. And so you're unable to zoom past where it can't display the map. So if you really want to zoom in, you will need to change to a more zoomable map. Great. There's a copy feature button, which is brand new. This is handy for moving stuff back and forth. So you can not only export stuff from maps using a landscape map feature, but you can also copy geography from other layers. And so if you, I'm going to actually show you that a little bit later when I'm walking through an example. And then there's the save or don't save your edits, and clicking the thumbs down if you haven't done anything will just reset everything. So that's how you begin editing these layers, and that's the basics of the layer pane, or of using this layers over here. But what happens when we actually begin to interact with the data? What happens if we, like, for example, click on a photo? Well, then we get this geography pane that's going to open up over here. And what this is displaying is all of the geography data that can be associated with any sort of geography in your account. So right now, for example, we're looking at a photo point. And so most of you are familiar with a photo point, and they have photos. But these same fields are also going to be available to, say, your property boundary. It's also got a place for photos and a description, map label, type, status, and species. Issue points, similarly. It's a little confusing because I copied it over. Call it unanimous. Issue points, same set of details, same place to put photos. So photos are not only stored in your site visit points that you're collecting with the app, but you can add photos to any geography that you're playing around with. So any of these layers down here can contain photos. So the fields available to you are name, description, pretty self-explanatory. There's map label, which of course is the label that's going to show up. These geography types, these geographies have types that you can give them. And this is going to be shared across all geography types. So you want to sort of use it a little sparingly, probably. You don't want this to get too big, but you can give these different points and polygons types. This is going to be, you can add to this in settings. You can also update the status to current or not current, and I believe you can also change the status in settings. Species is something that's there if you want to log which species. So some people like to use this for maybe if you're doing vegetative surveys, or if you want a specific area to denote like a rare species habitat or something like that, which will probably go in the conservation value geography. You can always add a species, and the species list is added to just by typing, or you can search and see if someone else has typed it before you. But if you don't, if it's not already there, then you can add to the list just by typing in the name and clicking enter, and then it will appear in your list of available species. And so finally down here we have photos. And I think this is probably a major point of confusion. We probably get we do get a fair number of tickets that are based on photos versus photo points. And so like I said, any of these geographies, any of these layers can have photos within them. And any layer can have multiple photos. So for example, I'm gonna head back to my site visits and go to my first one. This photo point number 2 actually has 2 photos associated with it. So the photo point, the geography, right, this point in space that we've mapped out, has its own set of details, its own name, description, and map label. But then contained within that, it's got these photos. And so when you're out taking photos with the app, what it's actually doing is it's creating a photo point and it's attaching the photo to that photo point. And what you're doing when you're adding a description to that photo is you're doing exactly that. You're adding the description to the photo, but not to the photo point. And so the app is going through and it's churning through and it's generating this automatic name and automatic label for the photo points, but you are actually altering the data for the photo itself when you're going in and adding a caption. You can, in the app, tap on a photo point and edit these fields, but just keep in mind that they are 2 different things, right? So there's the photo point, and then there's the photos contained within it. And so when you generate that report with a mobile app, it's going through and it's looking at all your photo points, and then it's looking at all the photos contained within that. And so you're actually sorting by or filtering by 2 different things there. And so just keep that in mind. It's sort of mapping, monitoring, report, it's associated with all of those things. But yeah, be aware that, photo points can have more than 1 photo. There are functions here for merging photo points if you need to, and there are functions in the app for creating new photo points and all of that stuff. So there are ways of managing this relationship. Right. So what I want to do now is just kind of show you how I would go about creating some geography. So I'm going to go ahead and add issue geography. And so I'm not going to do it from this map because this is a site visit map. I'm not going to do it from here because this is a stewardship site map. But what I want to do is I actually want to create an issue for that geography to live in. And that is in the status tab. You can see I've already mapped out some invasives, but I'm just going to create a new issue. I'm going to call it Barberry Patch. And this information over here belongs to this particular record, right? So this name, this description belongs to this issue record. I can give it its own type and severity, because we're in an issue here. I don't have a good one for the Barberry Patch, but we can now change the severity. But if I click on the layers button over here, notice editable layers, this issues layers is right up top. So now I can start mapping this. And so since it's a Barberry Patch, I'm going to go ahead and draw it as an area. I'm going to click on the pencil button. Just going to draw a little area right there. Click OK. And now it's drawn on the map. And if I click on it, we'll see the set of attributes that this layer has, right? These are those details, so I could name it Barberry Patch. I could add a description for this particular geography and a label and all of that stuff. And the reason that it doesn't automatically inherit this issue description into this is because you might have multiple things, multiple geographic items mapped out for any particular issue. And so then it might get a little confusing. And so, for example, we'll draw another area here. Maybe a little one right here. And you can actually double click to stop drawing. Click OK. And so now we've got two different patches, and we can give each one its own description, maybe its own photos and stuff like that. So maybe we want to change how certain things are styled. And so I'm actually going to make this an observation and make this a invasive control, just to show you how this works. And so if we want to change how these things look on the map, click on the little, find the layer, click on the little swatch right here, and you can change the color by dragging this back and forth. You can also, if you know the color's little code, the RGB or the hex value, or the hues, saturation, and the luminance, you can enter those values or copy paste them from your browser. I have a little eyedropper tool that I like to use to grab colors that I like because I'm a nerd like that. And so I'll have a nice little purple that you can copy in and then make it that specific purple. So for an area, this is how you can change the color. You can change the transparency. For an area, you can not only change the outline, which is what we're changing right now, but if you change this line to fill, now what we're editing is the inside of the polygon. And so we can, I'm just going to make it that same purple. That should work. Yep. And I'm going to change the transparency to that. And you can see now it's nice and filled in and semi-transparent. I really like doing that for my area, for my polygon features. It really helps me when I'm looking at a busy map, tell what's inside and what is outside. And if they're getting in the way, you can always make them invisible. The other thing that you can do is if you have two different types of things on a map and you want to style them differently, you can click on this and say style by type. And so now those types that I just changed in the geography, it's going to allow me to change the style for each different one. So I'm actually going to change the fill as well to this kind of green. So I'm just going to copy it, change the fill to that kind of green, and make it semi-transparent. And so now they're appearing differently on the map. You have a bunch of different types. You can have a bunch of different styles. Changing appearance works a little bit different for the different types of geography. Points, you can see there's no available. You can't make it just the outline. You can only change the color. For lines, you can change whether it's solid, dashed, or dotted, and you can change the relative thickness of the line, the dashed or dotted line. And then finally, for areas, you can change the fill like I showed you, but you can also change that outline to dashed or dotted or anything like that. Whoops. So that's how you can style by different things. The other way I'm going to show you of creating geography is copying stuff over from another map. And so if you say you have a point right here, and you want that to become an issue, well, there's this button right here, which we went over actually in the last training, which is convert to issue, but I'm not going to use that for this example. What I'm going to do is create a new issue, call it euonymus patch. And what I want to do is I want to steal this point right here, because I was out on my site visit and I took that picture, but now I want to know where it is on my issues map. And so what I'll do, click on the layers button, click edit layer for issue points, because I want to bring in the point from my site visits. And I'll click on this copy button. And so it says, okay, what layer do you want to copy from? And I'll select site visit points, click OK. And then I'll just select that point. It'll say, are you sure you want to copy from that point into this? I'll say yes. And so now what we have is our euonymus patch all nice and mapped. I do need to click my thumbs up to save those edits. It'll save my changes. And so now when I click on that, whoops, I'm just going to make my site visits invisible there. And so now when I click on that, you'll see that it's this issues map item. I can change the name to euonymus, and I can start managing this like that. I could have also selected multiple points if I wanted to. You can select lines and stuff like that. I'll hopefully get to showing you a nifty trick with combining these service layers and parcels, selecting multiple parcels. It's really neat. So only other couple features I want to show you, some of these basic features, are some of these different buttons up here. So this expand button will just make it bigger. So if you're doing a lot of map work and you want to have a nice big map, you can click on that expand button. The other button is this little information button, which is kind of cool. Probably doesn't get used that often, but if you click on it, so clicking on imagery, sometimes it will tell you the date when the imagery was taken, if that is available. We'll see if that works on any of our other. So if that date is not available, then it won't return the date to you, but sometimes that works. You can also use the info button to click on different features, and it will try to show you some of the location data for it. So the area and the perimeter, for example. If I click on a point, it will show me where it is in space. If I click on this site visit line, it's actually going to tell me how long that site visit line is. So I think that's kind of cool. So the info button is just kind of neat for clicking on things and finding a little bit more about them. And then there's this gallery button. This another feature we introduced a few months ago, which is very handy for reviewing your photo information. And so the photo gallery is going to respond based on where you are on a map. And so it's going to filter all of the photos that you're looking at on your layers. So if you have issues and site visits open, then it's going to show you, oops, just going to get rid of that. Then it's going to show you all of the photos and all of your site visits and issues. But if you just want to look at site visits photos, then you can turn the issues layer off. And so now what we're looking at are just the visible photos for our site visits. If I click on my baseline reports layer, it's also going to show me all the photos taken in my baseline reports layer. So that's a layer that lives inside of your property assets. And so now if I can zoom around, and you'll see it live filter based on the display up here on the map. So it's a really nice way if you have a bunch of photos that are all taken in a certain part of the property and you want to see all of those photos and go through them, maybe get a good idea of how the property has changed over time. You can zoom to a particular part of the property and then just sort of take a stroll and iterate through those photos using the left and right button here. And so this is also a pretty slick way of going through your photos and taking a look and maybe changing the data as you are going, as you're iterating through them. And it's just a nice way of getting a handle on what's going on on particular parts of these properties. You can select multiple photos from here as well, and you can download them, or even, I think you can clear these from your selection. Caleb, do you have something to add?
Yeah, maybe point out that as you're hovering over those thumbnails, it is highlighting the geography they come from, and also the direction, if there's direction information being.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's very, very handy. So as you're hovering over these, you can see which direction the photographer was facing, as long as that was captured by their device, of course. So for example, this photo here has no direction degrees, so that little arrow won't work. So the gallery feature is going to come back in our next feature, which is view maps. Caleb, is there any other feature that you think is sort of integral to these record maps that you think I sort of skipped over that you'd like to highlight?
Not right now. I think you're good.
Okay, cool, great. One thing I did forget as I was asking you that question, if you are clicking around and you want to go to the record where the thing was created, there's this handy button right here, which is go to record, which is going to take you straight to where you can then edit that geography, or you can see where it was created. And so when I clicked on that site visit point and clicked on go to record, it took me right to the site visit record. All right, moving right along. So the next type of map is a view map. And so this is something that maybe some of you might be unaware of, but basically anything that you create a view of, so properties, stewardship sites, site visits, issues, if that stuff can be mapped, then you can view that view as a map. So for example, if I change this drop down to all stewardship sites, and you can see I've been messing with this morning, so choose display as grid. So here are all 3 stewardship sites in my account. And I've made the fields available that I want to see. But maybe I want to see these on a map. And it really is as simple as clicking on these 3 dots right here, clicking display as map. And this is going to do a few really cool things. The first thing is when you click on this, the pop-up right here is going to display those fields that you selected in your view. And so you can select additional fields for your pop-up by clicking on additional fields. And then when I click on it again, now you can see those additional fields are showing up in my pop-up. So that's cool thing number 1. The other thing that you can do is we have, let me see, the ability now to, so I showed you how to style by those different geography fields, but for view maps, you can actually style by any feature that you've made visible. So any of those fields that I chose to select and make visible, we can now style by those different things. So I could now style this map of stewardship sites by property interest. So I could make my fee ones blue and my conservation easements green. And you can see how this could be really, really helpful. You can now start styling these things by any field that's available to you. Another great feature of this is the ability to export. So you can click on the 3 dots and click export data, and that will export all of these shapefiles that we're looking at, and it will export them along with the fields that you've made available. So if your GIS person needs a list of, hey, can you get me a shapefile of all of our properties, and I kind of need counties in the attribute table, you can put the counties as an available field, and then you can export your data, and that shapefile that's exported will have that as a an attribute field. Very, very neat. The other thing that this is going to do, it's going to be smart enough to respond to queries. And so these are going to be actual queries, not just filters. So this gets into a little bit of the nitty-gritty with views, but you can actually write queries for views. And so you can say, let's see, you can change this to, say, property interest. And so now we've queried out and we're just showing our conservation easements. And so now our map will respect that as well. And it will just show us our conservation easement. The other neat thing that this can do is I showed you that that gallery feature, that photos feature, and that can also be used within map view maps. So if I click on display as map, now we're looking, so I changed this to all site visits. Now we're looking at a map of all of our site visits, and I can actually look at all of the photos and all of our site visits. And I can zoom around to different properties. It's going to be smart enough to just show me, just filter out the photos that were taken on these particular site visits, so based on where I'm looking. So I can zoom around and really dive in and see what's going on. It's just a really neat way of reviewing your data. And of course, if you really like this and you want to be able to pull it up again and it's based on a query and stuff like that, you can, of course, save it as a view. So you can pull it up later, so it will appear in your list of views. And you can also save it as dashboard, which means saving it as a widget. One caveat is if I do save this to my dashboard, it will not have the gallery feature available. The gallery feature is only going to be available based on within this view. All right. But earlier I did go ahead and make a dashboard that is just a stewardship site map. And so now you can see if I click on this, go to the result, it will take me straight to my Smithwood stewardship site. So perhaps skipping a step if you're used to using that property map and then you have to click on stewardship site, just make a map of stewardship sites, put it on your dashboard, you'll be able to go right there. All right, so the final feature, and I'm glad we have a little bit of time to talk about this, is our new custom layers. And sorry, custom layers are not new. They've been around for a while, but we did just introduce a bunch of new fun features. So there are two types of custom layers that are available to you. There's imported areas, and then there's service layers. Imported areas are good for sort of small layers that you want to be able to query on, which I'll show you a little bit in a moment. And they're good for sort of global layers that you want to be able to see across your account. But those layers, the caveat is those layers can't be too big because it will slow down your map performance drastically. So you can't import, for example, all of the parcels in your state. However, if that if those parcels exist as a map service layer, then you can just link to that service layer of parcels and you'll be able to see those on your map. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm gonna import a new custom layer. It's gonna ask me what kind, and I'm gonna say a layer created by drawing or importing, because what I wanna import is just a layer containing watersheds. So I'll name it watersheds. I'm gonna make it searchable, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. And then I'm gonna click on the edit layer button, click on import geography. I'm gonna import a zipped shapefile that I've prepared beforehand of watersheds. This, I just stole this off of the Massachusetts GIS department website. Very nice, and making that publicly available. So I'm gonna import that. It's gonna import all of that map data and hopefully not take too terribly long. Let me see here. did try this before the presentation and it worked pretty well, but you never know. There we go. All right. So it is a layer that covers the whole state, but the layer itself is not huge. It's not, there aren't tons of them. So it's just going to go ahead and prepare that map data. And one thing I should point out while it's working, sometimes you do need to do a little bit of work to get the shapefile into a place where it can be imported. One thing you may want to do, here I am in QGIS, obviously this is not landscape. One thing you may want to do if you want to be able to see the name of different things that are mapped out is you want to make one of the fields called and actually call it name. And so landscape will be able to import that name field into the geography name itself. You can also do that with description and label. So it looks like this is going to take a little bit of time. There we go. All right, great. So it's been converted successfully. Do not forget to save with your thumbs up. It's going to save those changes. And from here, we could style each of these differently if we had time, but we don't. And so I'm just going to keep all of them nice and green. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to a view, going to go to all properties, and I'm going to head to my available categories. And remember when I marked that as is layers searchable? Well, what that means is it's going to query based on the geography contained within these properties. So that's the parcel boundary. And it's going to tell me which ones are inside of those various watersheds. And so now watersheds is actually available as a field. And if I click OK, I can see now that all of these are within the Housatonic watershed. And what's more, I could write a query, you know, if I was a big statewide organization and I wanted to pull out which things were in which watersheds, I could actually write a query to suit that need. The other thing that I imported beforehand is these ecoregions, so you can see which ecoregions are in different layers. So those are custom layers, right? Those are our smaller layers that are going to be brought in. But the other thing we can bring in are those hosted service layers. And this we just introduced last week. And so these are layers like parcel data for the whole state or 2019 ortho imagery. And these are layers that are typically publicly hosted, maybe by, like in my case, all of these examples are using MassGIS data. But it's going to allow you to slap a base map underneath everything, like that's a tile service, or a feature service or map service. And then you'll actually be able to pull from the vector information if you want and visualize those things. So before we got set up, I actually loaded in the level 3 parcel data as a service layer. There's a little bit more information. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. There's a little bit more information on importing custom layers if you search custom layers. So I'm going to have to zoom through this. But now what that means is from an individual record, I can access those custom layers and I can see my watersheds, but I can also see my level 3 parcel data. So this is the parcel data for all of the state of Massachusetts. Again, that's hosted on another website that Landscape is just visualizing. And I can click on it and I can manage the pop-up in that custom layer field. I can even copy features directly from this layer into Landscape. So this looks a little bit busy right now, but if I wanted to edit the parcel boundary, I could easily copy directly from my level 3 parcel data and just pull the parcel right into Landscape. Very cool. Sorry, we're running out of time. I would show you. So this is a really powerful new feature. I'm sure a lot of you are getting really excited about this. I know I got really excited about this. And the other thing it can do is host those base map layers, so those tile layers. And so if you want, I really like OpenStreetMap. I used it a lot at the trustees. So you can bring that in as an XYZ tile layer. You can also, if you have more up-to-date ortho imagery, that your state, county, or region is making available, you can bring that in as well as a base map. Those are not going to be interactive. Those tile layers are not interactive like those vector layers. They behave a little bit differently. Again, I'm sorry to rush through this at the end. If you click on the help button and type in custom layers, I did update the knowledge base article to help walk you through importing these various service layers. Only other thing I want to add is I'm trying to get an article going of helpful service layers for different states. And so if you find a layer you really like that's helpful, please email it to me and I'll add it to that article so that other people don't have to go shopping for the same thing. And hopefully we can make things a little bit easier for folks.